Do you wear wigs?
No, I do not.
Have you worn wigs?
No, I have not.
Will you wear wigs?
Maybe.
When will you wear wigs?
My name is Kat. I have kind of an insane story to share, one that still doesn't feel real sometimes. A couple years ago, I was 34, still living with my parents, and anxiety and depression controlled my life. Every year, I would rewatch The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings because they made me happy. But in 2023, something changed. When I watched Bilbo run down the path after the dwarves, I suddenly decided I wanted an adventure of my own. So I applied for a work visa to New Zealand. The process was incredibly difficult because I got flagged over my mental health history. And after months of stress, panic attacks, and back and forth with immigration, I was ready to give up. Around that time, I reached out to Jed on Cameo, and he told me to keep fighting and said he believed it would work out. He had no idea how right he was. I landed in Auckland on International Hobbit Day 2024, and somehow, over the last 2 years, my entire life has changed. I was a background extra on set and have worked on Small Town Scandal with Peter Hamilton. I got a job at Weta Unleashed as a tour guide. My boss is Richard Taylor, which still feels surreal to say out loud. I used to have panic attacks speaking in front of crowds, and now I lead a 90-minute tour for groups of up to 30 people. I've got autism and ADHD, and being a tour guide ended up being the perfect job because I'm allowed to get excited and talk about the things I love all day. My nickname at work is Oakenshield. I made my own Thorin Oakenshield cosplay, and because of What a Workshop, I discovered a creative side of myself I never knew existed. I started painting, teaching myself sculpting, and creating art in ways I never imagined I'd be capable of. One of the proudest moments I've had was getting Employee of the Month at work, and somehow I got it because of Richard Armitage. And speaking of Richard Armitage, one of the most impulsive things I've ever done was fly to England just to attend his book event. A few years ago, I never would have believed I was capable of doing something like that. I worked extra shifts, stayed late, and saved every dollar I could so I could make the trip happen. Everyone at work supported me, which honestly meant a lot. When I got there, I was so nervous that one of the women organizing the event held my hand when I first walked up to him until I settled down. But after a few minutes, I relaxed, and we ended up having a really meaningful conversation about New Zealand, Weta Workshop, and filming The Hobbit. I gave him paintings I made inspired by his books, and he was unbelievably kind. He even insisted on giving me a signed soft cover copy of Geneva, even though I already owned the hardcover. And then after all that, I spontaneously traveled to Scotland for a couple days before flying back to New Zealand. I've also had experiences I never thought I'd have in my life. Kayaking down the Pelorus River, visiting Edoras, celebrating International Hobbit Day in New Zealand, going to Hobbiton more times than I can count, and somehow even getting comfortable driving on the left side of the road. I still have moments where I doubt myself, and sometimes this whole journey feels impossible to process. but for the first time in my life, I feel like I understand what living really is. Because of The Hobbit, I found confidence I didn't know that I had. Because of Weta, I found creativity. And because of Jed's words when I needed them most, I kept fighting long enough to experience all of it. I find myself now working at Weta Workshop, something I never dreamed of. I even met Jed there, which was such a full circle moment. I've barely scratched the surface of everything that's happened over the last 2 years, but I know one thing for sure. This adventure is far from over. Also, I failed twice to bungee jump, so apparently I do still have limits.
Hi, so I just want to say thank you because there's no way I'd be where I am today if it wasn't for Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit trilogy, and of course, your video message from Cameo. I didn't actually know what I was expecting when I reached out. I just knew that I needed something to help pick me up a little bit, and I can say that it worked. And I guess my question would be, would you have ever expected your words to have the impact that they obviously did? And even in general with Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit trilogy, did you ever expect when you were making them that they would affect people's lives in the ways that they currently do today, all these years later?
Kat's question: did you ever think that your words and video message could affect someone's life as much as they have? Well, no, I didn't. I didn't know that my video message would have such a profound effect. I just wanted to give you encouragement to follow your dreams, and sometimes that is a very, very difficult thing to do. And you did that. You were very brave, and if my words were in any way a little prompt to help with that, then I'm very grateful that I got to do that for you. So I always try and encourage people to say yes to things, even if it's hard. And well done for following your dream, and look where you are now. Congratulations. Thanks, Kat.
Hello.
Hey, how are you doing?
Mark,
Good. How are you?
kia ora.
Yay, good to see you both.
You too.
Amanda, you shared a letter that came from, I believe her name was Kat. Is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
correct. Yes.
Yeah, so I was really moved and so pleased by the letter and the whole narrative that the letter basically described, which goes to there's some things in life where things come easily to you, right? Everyone's different. And that's not the case for everybody. So, but it's so important to embrace yes, any in whatever increments you can do it. Like whatever increments you can do it. It really just has to be that mindset. And that came through in Kat's letter so beautifully. Just the increments, the overcomes and like the stretching through fear or discomfort or neurodivergence, like the things that just the commitment was beautiful. And I think that's probably the most important thing. And like when you look at Frodo's arc in Fellowship, he says, I'll take the ring to Rivendell because Gandalf has asked me. Now he's in Rivendell and he has a better sense of what's really going on. He said, all right, well, I'll take the ring to Mordor, though I do not know the way. Now he's at the end, he's at Amonhen, and now he definitely knows. He's now got full knowledge, and he makes a third choice, the
Yeah.
most knowledgeable choice he makes, um, and does it anyway. I think that's it. This increment of choices, and I think that's really beautiful. So I think maybe that's probably the one thing that's applicable to life, just generally.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh yeah, a pleasure. So lovely. Thank you for reaching out.
Yeah, you were the first person I really wanted to talk to. I didn't realize how involved you were in getting those films off the ground. I'm kind of in awe of how it came about.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's kind of you to say. I think I just don't think I made much of a show of it through the whole process. And it's funny because in the immediate aftermath, I did a podcast with Billy and Dom, and they sort of sweetly and jokingly said that when they first knew me, they assumed that my primary function was just to interact with the cast and sort of like, in support, like, in support of, which is something I did do, but
Yeah.
I never really talked about anything else that I was doing. So I was doing all these different things at the same time, but not really speaking of them, which feels very New Zealand, by the way, even though at that point I had not really spent much time in New Zealand.
I think maybe something happens when your feet hit the ground on the tarmac in Wellington.
Yes,
That all of artifice kind of drops away.
I think that's right.
Vigo talked about that of realizing that the film was truly egalitarian in terms of
Yes.
everybody felt like they were on the same page.
Yeah, there was, I agree with that. There was a great humility and just a focus on what was important.
Yeah.
I see the sword you have back there. It's you
Oh,
have the real one. We have a knockoff one, but we've
Mhm.
got the same one.
well, I've got it's sort of a fusion. So Vigo has the real, that's Anduril, right? So, but Vigo has the true Anduril, but Peter and Fran had the swordsmiths make me a replica.
I didn't realize that you were so into D&D, Dungeons and Dragons,
Yes.
growing up.
Yeah, no, no, no. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in the late 70s, really old school Dungeons and Dragons, and then played then when I started my own my own game as a dungeon master, and I started playing with basically the same group of people that I don't really sadly get to play much anymore, maybe at best once a year, but it's with the same group of people, kids who are now obviously adults, that I played with. It's the same campaign, the same characters, everything.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you know Luke Gygax by any chance?
No, no, I know who, no, but I've never met.
Yeah. I got to meet him last year at the Isle of Wonders in Tres. And of course,
Mm,
his father is the person who kind of came up with D&D. And
yeah, Gary Gygax for sure. Legendary.
I hadn't really, it wasn't something that was on my radar growing up on a farm in New Zealand, but
Yeah,
it's a huge part of this franchise. And, it's a lot of people that I meet play it. So
yeah.
I'm
It was definitely my gateway into the Lord of the Rings and into other fantasy book series. So yeah, I would not have, I may not have found my way other without Dungeons and Dragons. I may not have found my way into all those great books.
So I read that you're from California originally and you moved to New Zealand, and I thought that was kind of cool because I'm from California and
Yeah.
I'm thinking about one day moving to New Zealand with Jed. So I was wanting to ask you, what was that experience like arriving in New Zealand?
You mean back in the day?
Well, when you moved there, yeah, to
Sure.
become a citizen.
Well, I had some, I mean, I had some really wonderful advantages because I had spent the better part of 5 years not living full time in New Zealand, but living most of March to October of most years in Wellington. And then my wife is a New Zealander, Rachel. And so and obviously that's why I made this huge group of friends through Rings. And then when I met Rachel at the very tail end of Rings, and then I of course had her family. So by the time we were moving back in 2023, like to move back full time. Um, I had I had a whole lovely network that was already waiting for me. So I had some very blessed advantages.
Oh, that sure helps.
Yeah.
Did you meet your wife because of the films, because of Lord of the Rings?
Well, only indirectly. She was a florist and she was doing flowers at Rick Porce's I think it was his 40th birthday, if
Yeah,
I had to guess.
yeah.
And so I was at that party, as were many others. And I saw Rachel at that party, and she's going to kill me for saying this on a podcast, but I was kind of completely poleaxed when I saw her. So at that point, I knew I had to do something to see if I could possibly date her.
Good for you.
Oh, I
Um,
just wanted to add, if you end up saying something that you want off the record, just let us know and we'll just take it off.
Sure, no, but I think I'll be okay. But thank you for offering. That's kind.
Okay.
do you think we've talked about this? There are so many people
Yeah,
who are neurodivergent, struggle with social interactions, struggle
yeah,
with social cues. But for some reason, with this particular group of films, especially, they find a commonality and a community.
yeah,
And, I mean, I guess it's because of the story structure. I guess it's because of the characters in the film. But I think there's more than that. I think there's a kind of I don't know, a sanctity and a soul and a heart in these movies that you don't get in a lot of other franchises.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I think Tolkien has a theme in these stories that you don't have to be important, you don't have to have status, you don't even have to be prepared. You just go for it. And I know that in the past you have encouraged people as well to
Yes.
just go for it.
Yeah, no, no. I have a guiding philosophy that you just say yes because more often than not, you don't need to do or know the entirety of a job or an opportunity or a path to start the first steps of it. And that if you're really committed to it and prepared to make some sacrifices in the process of it, you will grow as the job grows. So by and large, if it's something that speaks to you passionately, you should definitely go for it because as particularly as I've gotten older, you realize that the universe only sometimes sends a handful of these kinds of moments of opportunity. Sometimes they're clear, sometimes they're less clear. So if you feel them anywhere in your orbit, certainly if I feel them in my orbit, I tend to lean into them.
Yeah, you met Peter a long time ago, back in the days of Bad Taste, and that was before he was even on my radar as an actor. I auditioned for the first round of Brain Dead before it kind of fell over and came back again.
Yeah,
But I never met Peter, I only met the casting director. And I actually met Peter backstage at a Stephen Sinclair play that I was doing called Caramel Cream.
right.
He offered me the part of Void, and I initially didn't really want to be a zombie. I'm really glad I said yes to it eventually. But what was it like years later coming back, being on Rings, having had that long um, kind of collaboration with him of trying to help him access Hollywood?
Sure. I mean, when I saw Bad Taste for the first time and I was working for this, sort of straight to video um, uh, distribution company, I was so gobsmacked by it and by the talent that just radiated and the innovation that sort of radiated off the screen that I really became very much a true believer. So, and I'm very artist first oriented generally.
Yeah.
So the minute and when I left that job, that straight to video job, which I was only in for about a year, I only took two things with me and I left, which was my video of Bad Taste and a videotape of Lars von Trier's Element of Crime, which was the first film he made out of
Wow.
Danish film school. And I vowed, I'm a terribly, terribly earnest person, but I also am one of those people that if I say I'm going to do something, I tend to bend myself and try to bend the world in my direction if I can. And I sort of vowed to the universe that I would make films with these two people somehow, some way, someday. And so yeah, so then when I ended up at New Line, and that ended up happening with both of them. Obviously, it happened with Peter in a very spectacular fashion.
Yeah. I think, the universe has a way of making people collide at the right times. And I've often talked about Lord of the Rings being the perfect storm
Yeah,
for New Zealand in terms of where the industry was placed. Xena and Hercules had just required Weta Workshop and Digital to grow a little bit in
yeah,
terms of them having the facility to do that. But also, Peter and Fran were in the right place, having had that success, as you mentioned, with Heavenly Creatures, and then, having done the Frighteners in terms of upskilling everything for digital manufacture in Wellington. And they got you, and they got Barry Osborne, they got the right people at the right time. And that doesn't happen very often in film.
no, hardly ever. I do believe I'm a big believer in providence, and I do believe there was providence here. I think all these talented people would have done wonderfully talented and brilliant things separately if somehow the Rings thing had not folded in. But all Rings provided this turbocharger of an opportunity that everyone was, you're right, perfectly poised for in that moment. Every single person was perfectly poised for it.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of things that came together just right for this to happen, but there was also, I was reading, there was a lot that you did that really pushed it through. And I just want to say I appreciate that. I know the fans appreciate that.
This idea that it could have fallen over at any time. And I didn't know that you had this relationship with Saul Zaentz going back that far as well.
Yeah, I tried to write him. I did write him a letter when I was very first at New Line because now I was at a theatrical distribution company, not my little straight to video company anymore. And I wrote him asking about the Lord of the Rings rights. But needless to say, he did not write back, which I didn't take personally. Um, but yes, no, I was completely, yeah, and I was obsessed with Peter as well, though I didn't had no idea that those two things would ultimately collide together. But yeah, I had a sort of a philosophy leaning into the yes thing again. I lived in a tiny little apartment a block from New Line by choice. I didn't have a car. I brought my lunch to work in a brown bag. Like I literally, all I wanted to do was put myself in a place where I thought I could be fearless, and I could do both things and not have to worry that my life would somehow spin out of control. I had no mortgage, I had no car, I had no spouse, I had no children. And this was all done by design because I sort of knew myself and know myself well enough that this is what it was going to take for me to do the bold thing if the bold thing presented itself.
It's really brave, man. There's a lot of people they would shy away from that. They would second guess themselves and find reasons to not make it happen. So I feel kind of inspired talking to you right now.
No, listen, I
That's
appreciate it. The way I sort of saw it, it was a chance. It was a chance to, because people often ask what producers or executive producers, or in my case, I was a studio executive, but the way New Line was structured, the executives there were very entrepreneurial. It wasn't as typical studio executive thing. But the main thing you do, 90% of it is picking the right people or being picked by them. And it's really just pulling things into orbit, the material, the artists. And I was blessed because I was at New Line. So the money, meaning the production money and the distribution were already there. So every day I woke up with two of the four spinning plates that had to occur. I already had two of them. Now, of course, I had to persuade and make a case for their utilization on behalf of anything. But still, the fact that they were right there just down the hall, um, I love that. I use that down the hall metaphor all the time back then. Now, of course, we're all on Zoom and none of us run down the hall anymore. But I
No.
used to have that thing, like sort of like those 30s and 40s movies, like courtroom dramas when the jury would read the verdict and then all the people would run out to pay phones. Like that was, that was sort of that was my self mythology.
That kind of leads into our first question, actually. What would you have been had you not been a producer? Could you see any other branch of a career for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I can and I would. I mean, I always felt if I had not gone into the movie business, I would have ended up in the diplomatic corps or I would have been a mediator, which is hysterical because basically that's essentially I ended up utilizing those aspects of myself in the movie business all the time. But that's what I was thinking at the time. I mean, I'd studied journalism, print journalism in university. I was editor of my university newspaper. I'd been an intern at the Los Angeles Times and another newspaper in Los Angeles. So I also had this kind of not addiction, but I had this sort of crave for chasing things. I like to chase things. I like to go after things. I'm one of those point and shoot sort of people. So if I get aimed and often, and by the way, Peter, who's a dear friend, but also knew me really well. So he would often help like steer me or aim me at things in the same way, I would allow myself to be steered and aimed at by all sorts of people because I knew it would activate something in me that I would then, put my head down like in a rugby charge, right? Just put your head down and go. So like that's the sort of person I was. But yeah, diplomat, even though it sounds kind of contradictory to the mediator diplomat, that's what I would have done if it wasn't the movies.
Yeah, I think they're pretty closely aligned, actually, as you say. There's an awful lot of mediation in your job in terms of working between a major studio, the auteur filmmaker, and this massive crew of people who are
Yeah.
all, you have to keep them all kind of happy and moving in the right direction. Um, I, I've not worked on a project before or since that has everybody so gelled together with a
Yeah.
commonality and a common goal of wanting to make something better than they possibly could have imagined before. The books mean so much to so many people. I did the two radio plays that they actually used to try and get the funding.
Oh,
And
wow.
I played Frodo and Legolas in the first script, and Craig Parker played it in the second script. And we played various other characters. It was a group of Wellington theatre actors that Peter and Fran knew. I walked out of that recording and I said to Peter jokingly, good luck, but you will never get the money to make these into a movie because I loved the book so much as a kid. I just
Yeah.
couldn't imagine them on the screen. And luckily for me, I'm wrong. I mean, it was always going to work out, but I have to admit that at that time I didn't believe that it was possible to actually pull off what they pulled off. So
Yeah.
I don't think most people believed it was possible until they saw it.
Yeah.
I read about your experience with when you guys first showed the 26 minutes at the
Mm,
festival then.
yeah.
Yeah, I bet that was really exciting.
It was. I mean, that was in a weird sort of way. That was a moment of higher drama than even the opening weekend of Fellowship, because we had sort of we'd sort of said, okay, we're gonna take control of the narrative. We're gonna show this mysterious film that really no one knows that much about other than they know the book. They may know Peter Jackson. There's been no, it's being shot in New Zealand, so there's no one talking about it because everyone that would talk about it is down there. And it was basically push all the chips in the middle of the table kind of moment. It was a classic collaboration because Peter is very much just the sort of person who would do something like that, and Bob Shea, who was the founder and chairman of New Line at the time, he was also a bit of a maverick spirit. So I think the two of them combined to this kind of bold idea.
At that time when you showed it, had you seen that final edit that they were about to show, or was that new to you?
No, it wasn't new. I'd been there. I'd been in the rooms where various versions, different edits of it, had been, sort of crafted. The idea of bookends versus no bookends, right? Just the secret. So yeah, there'd been different shapes and forms of it. So yeah, so I knew what was going to be. I hadn't seen anything projected, but I knew what the content of it was.
It crashed the internet when they played it on the internet, didn't it?
Yes, 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 yeah. Well, actually, I think the thing that crashed the internet, I think, was the very first New Line
That's
teaser
right, the teaser trailer.
teaser trailer, which
Yeah,
which but which included bits of footage from Peter's pitch documentary. It's not really a documentary, but his sort of his self-documentary where he was cataloging all the things that were going on to make the movie happen, and the forced perspective and Gollum and Massive and all these different innovations.
yeah. I remember trying to watch it with some people from the horse department on the old dial-up computer, and it just we get like a 30 seconds into it, and it would just crash, and it'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking because they were so excited to see if
no,
there
for
was anything
certain,
that they'd done on there.
for
When you
certain.
say dial up, I automatically hear that sound, the
Yeah,
A.
of course. Everyone knows that sound. Well, maybe everyone of a certain age, because I can imagine they're not Gen Alpha people who know that sound. It would be some weird audio artifact sound. It would be hysterical.
Mhm.
What do you think is your most underrated project?
I was thinking, ironically, it's one that Lord of the Rings sort of inadvertently swamped. So we made a version. We made a film of the Patricia Highsmith novel Ripley's Game with Liliana Cavani, who is this legendary Italian filmmaker who had famously made The Night Porter in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
That's the thing that kind of put her on the map globally. And so we did an adaptation of Ripley's Game with John Malkovich as Ripley. And
Wow.
it was a heartbreaker because it turned out incredibly well. But it was being made and being ready for release right in the midst of Lord of the Rings. And I think ultimately the studio just decided, we don't want to apply marketing and theatrical bandwidth to taking this movie out. So it actually never got released in the US. You can see it on like Amazon, or like there's different places you can watch it, but it was never released theatrically, which was a shame because it was brilliantly reviewed. It got released in Europe. So that was the real missed opportunity, I would say. It's a terrific film.
You have routines that you repeat every day?
I'd say the only thing that I can count on to do every single day is I do transcendental meditation.
Wow.
So, and I've been doing that. I normally do it twice a day, but sometimes when you're in pre-production or product, when you're in the actual movie making process, it can be hard to do it twice a day, in which case I only do it once a day. But I've been doing that for a bunch of years. And that's probably the one thing that I consistently do every day that I can count on to do.
So something that you grew up, something that was part of your life before filmmaking, or something that you kind of found while you were doing it?
I picked it up. My producing partner, Jane Fleming, suggested it to me, and so I went and took a course and learn. It's not that hard to learn how to do it, but there is a sort of a methodology. So I did that here in Los Angeles when I was still living here, and and then yeah, I just took it into my life, which I find it. I mean, David Lynch is like one of the more, more famous like practitioners of it. But there are many others. But yeah, so that's a big part of my life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I used to go and see my horse, the Rohan horse I bought at the end of filming. Seb,
Yeah,
he was actually I kept him in the paddock where we shot the reshoots with the Mamakill coming down in Kiwi Park.
sure.
He lived there for 22 years of his life after filming, and if I was having stress in my life or I was having a bad day, I'd go and ride what I called my soul machine.
Right.
And sitting on a horse because I'd done that most of my life was like that was meditation for me.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being on movie sets and multitasking as much as you did became overwhelming. So I think the
Yeah.
meditation probably helped a lot, didn't it?
Absolutely, it does now. Unfortunately, I did not meditate back in the era of rings. I did not meditate, and even though I'm pretty compartmentalized and a mostly calm person, you know, uh, there are sometimes levels of stress that, like, no matter how kind of calm you are, when you're under intense amounts of stress and the stakes are incredibly high, there are going to be moments where you are not your best self, where you make decisions or engage in, you get tempted to take the easier path, whatever you think the easier path is, the path of least resistance or the path of least anticipated criticism. And that tends to almost never serve the larger goal. But sometimes it happens. And I have had moments, I definitely had, a handful of moments on Lord of the Rings where I did that. And, but you just have to, when that happens, you just have to sort of let it go and just aim like, I'm not going to do that again. Or I'm going to try not to do that again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember that many moments on set. I think we were all aware of the fact that everybody was under a lot of pressure. I know
Yeah,
I was having a bad day one day on set and then remembered that all of those wetter physical people that were dressing us with the horse department had been there since 5 in the morning,
yeah,
having washed those costumes the night before till 10 at night. And
yeah.
although we were feeling tired and run down, there was no complaints from out in the field for all of those volunteers that we had. And I just remember thinking, I'm really lucky. I get to be
Yeah,
in this film. You know,
yeah.
I get there's somewhere down the line there's going to be some glamour and there's going to be some payoff, but for a lot of these folk, that doesn't really it's not really the same for them.
No, I agree with you. I can remember driving in a car with Peter going to or fro. I think maybe it was the film unit. I can't remember. But in any case, and I was one of these stress moments where it was probably playing on my face, and he sort of looked at me and said, "Listen," he said, "you need to decide who you're going to believe and what you're going to believe, and then get in. And once you make that decision, he didn't say get in alignment. That's sort of, but the implication was." You have to who you're going to believe and what are you going to believe, and then get in alignment with that. Because otherwise, you will be in constant, like, the implication was you'll be at constant war with yourself, and it will be very difficult, like, to not just radiate the anxiety of it. And I thought that was pretty wise.
Do you have any advice for people starting off and wanting to be in this profession in terms of what kind of things you would advise them to head towards?
Yeah, I mean, I usually find the most important thing, if you can, is to identify an arena because it's very easy it's so the endeavor of trying to be in the film business is so huge and vast, and it can be almost you can make it impossible to figure out how to access it. Um, but if you have an enthusiasm for fantasy, science fiction, and horror, which I happened to like back in the day, right? Then you can put your enthusiasm for the film industry and aim it generally toward that arena. Because what'll happen that it'll make it easier to meet people, befriend people, find allies, find collaborators, find boosters, you know. Whereas if you just try to like look at the totality of things, you're just going to get overwhelmed and your efforts will be diffuse. And
Yeah.
there's so much inertia to overcome that we just shouldn't kid ourselves about it. There's so much inertia and resistance to overcome that the best way to do it is just give yourself a little bit of focus. It doesn't even have to be that much. And just because if you just aim yourself at something, then you can a year later you can sort of say, oh, maybe this is not for me. I'll aim myself elsewhere, but at least get started. That would be probably my best advice.
It's good advice. Do you keep any small objects with you for comfort?
It's
Is
funny.
there
I'm not sure if I call it for comfort. I have my Punamu, which is actually my Punamu part two, because I was given by Janine Avery, who worked with Barry Osborne on the films I think at the end of production. She gave me a koru shaped Punamu, which I cherished, and I had for almost 20 years, and then unfortunately it broke. I mean, it slipped from my hand and broke, which I was sort of crestfallen at the time. But then I was sort of advised, no, don't. Whatever happened was meant to happen. And so my wife, who I didn't know at all at the time when I was given the Punama, so she then bought me a new one. So yeah, so I have that always. I wear that always. I would say that's the one thing.
I'm wearing mine today that Jed gave me, and every time he flies, every time he travels, I wear it just to kind of keep him safe.
Well,
And
I
I
love
have
that.
one. I have one that she bought me, and I wear it every time I travel too. And we actually put them together before I leave to go somewhere, and then I wear it
Yeah.
whenever I'm traveling.
No, I love it. Mine is I think it's Toki. Is that how it's
Okay,
pronounced? A
yeah,
Toki shape. But and I don't know if Rachel did this on purpose or not, but it's got it's carved with sort of like the way like when a river passes, the way the water represents on the top, it's kind of ripples. So it's
yeah.
got these ripples carved into it. And of course, where I live in New Zealand, which is in Masterton, is not very far from a number of rivers. So I'm sort of surrounded by them, which I don't know if she did that on purpose or whether she just thought it was aesthetically pleasing. But either way, I thought it was very apt.
Well, it's sort of apt in terms of your career too, because we are on this river that flows, and each
Yes.
time we get a bit further down the river towards the sea, there's new opportunities, and it's whether or not you take those tributaries coming in.
Yeah.
I'm waxing lyrical now, but that's the way that I see
No,
it.
totally, 100%.
Yeah. I grew up in a place called Mataraa, which is out of Taihape. It's only half an hour from Mount Ruapehu and Mount Ngauruhoe.
Mm.
And Ruapehu erupted when I was about 6, and my mother had been reading The Hobbit to me, and I actually asked her if, when the Ruapehu erupted, if that was Mount Doom, not realizing that 30 something years later, the mountain right next to it, Ngauruhoe, the Maunga, would be used to represent that in the movies. So,
Wow. I
yeah.
love those sorts of stories.
Yeah, I used to ride around the hills pretending to be Strider on my horse, and the sheep were these orcs, not knowing that one day they actually would that be trying to put that on film.
I love that. When I was little and playing Dungeons and Dragons, having read, I would told myself that I was Frodo, but as I've gotten older as an adult, I realized I was really never Frodo. I was pretty much always Bilbo, meaning I was always like even though because it's easy to say like, oh, you know, whatever you think that has the most main character energy, to use that expression. But the truth is, I'm really more Bilbo. It makes 100% more sense. That's actually who I genuinely am as a person now that I have more perspective on it.
So, what exactly about Bilbo do you identify with that character?
Well, I think part of it is that I have no children. I live this existence where really interesting people flow into my life and sometimes sweep me away on adventures. And I also think, one of my favorite, I think the only time I've ever participated in Tolkien reading day, I actually ended up reading not a chapter, but a portion of Thief in I think it's Thief in the Night, which is where Bilbo's trying to make peace, right? Before the Battle of the Five Armies. He's not successful, but he tries to. And I thought, well, that's that moment with the Arkenstone. That's me for sure. Like
Yeah.
100%. That's not only my Lord of the Rings story, that's my global human story generally.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is a remarkable part of the book. I love how much attention Peter took to filming that when we actually filmed that on The Hobbit, and how
Yeah.
much it meant to Richard Armitage and to Lee Pace playing Thranduil and Ian McKellen to get that scene right, because it's such a turning point in the film in terms of, Thorin believing that this is the ultimate betrayal. How could you do that? And
Yeah.
then forgiving him for it,
Yeah.
when he's finally at the end where he's passing. But one of the things that I feel eternally grateful for is that I got to be in places with high emotion. As an actor, you don't really get to do that very often in your career.
Yeah.
So, for me, the Battle of Pelennor Fields, that wonderful day with Bernard Hill, so inspiring. I was put next to Miranda Otto to make sure that her and Dominic were safe on the horse. And I
Right.
looked down that line of extras and I looked at Miranda Otto and Dominic, and I could just see that no one was acting anymore.
Right.
Bernard was so inspiring that there was a storm coming in. There was a sense that we were really galloping towards death and glory
Yeah.
for Theoden, our king, not for Bernard Hill, the actor.
Right.
Everything that he did on that day to create this, for him to be real as Theoden, it came over all of us. We just felt like we were actually galloping to do something for our king. It was, if I never get to do another scene like that in my life, I've got that. I hold that as a touchstone for myself.
And it comes across on film, like evidently, like completely evidently. Like, even if you end up just seeing it as a clip on YouTube, which is not the ideal way to watch any kind of film thing, in my opinion. But you can't help but finish the clip. So I guess that tells the tale.
Yeah, I still think it's the most remarkable battle scene, that in Helm's Deep, ever shot
Yeah.
on film. And I don't think that anyone's come close to creating that level of emotion, actually.
Yeah. No,
We
I
take
agree.
our hats off to ourselves.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Um, Back to the questions. If you had a choice, would you rather be 6 years younger or 6 inches taller?
6 years younger for sure, only because, time is the only time is actually the only real asset. I mean, I know people have points of view about other things, but you've got to learn to spend it wisely because if you don't spend it wisely, someone else will probably spend it for you. And it's the only thing you can't get more of. So I will always take time over pretty much anything else.
And you can't get it back too. I mean, there have definitely been times in my career where I've been disappointed. You talk about saying yes, and I've always maintained, and I say this to young actors, say yes to opportunities that you haven't done before.
Yeah.
Because it may not be the film that you're hoping to get this year, it may not be the project you were hoping to do this year, but there'll be something in it that will teach you something further down the line, or it might be a wonderful clip you can put on your show reel or whatever. So I've always said yes to things, and there's been a couple of times in my career I've said no because I couldn't be bothered or because other stuff was happening, and I've truly regretted that I couldn't get that time back. But
Yeah.
you have to let it go.
No, 100% right.
Yeah. Um,
Would you be 6 inches taller or 6 years younger?
as an actor, 6 years younger, or every time you start to lose the ability to play 20.
Right. Or as
Plenty of actors think that they can and they dye their hair and they, have work done or whatever. But there comes a point in your career where you just know you can't play those heroes that you read about anymore. And
yeah.
it's disappointing. You're just like, oh, if only. Yeah.
Well, that leads into the next question. Who were your childhood heroes?
I mean, I'm probably dating myself with this reference. I'm definitely dating myself with this reference, and it's a U.S. reference as well. But like, so I was born in 1963. So I would say I've always been drawn to great communicators. So Walter Cronkite, who anchored the CBS Evening News here in the U.S. from the sort of early 60s to the early 80s, and was famously, and I think accurately, the most trusted man in America, and I think fairly so. And I was remember watching him, during the Vietnam War, during, Watergate, all these things, and the idea of someone who could communicate well and honestly was very powerful. And even though it's going to sound like a complete flip, by the time I got into high school and university, I became a huge fan of Hunter S. Thompson, not so much just because the idea of fearlessness and shamelessness and also just being able to again to communicate something so pungently, like really it's not a given. It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. My brother introduced me to two writers around that time, Carlos Castaneda and to Jack Kerouac.
Right.
And I think that Jack Kerouac especially is incredibly brave in terms of the way that he wrote about a moment in time in American history and American pop culture.
Yeah, for sure.
But and through that I got to read some Hunter S. Thompson as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What kind of stories feel worth your time at this stage of life?
Yeah. This is an interesting one. it's not a dodge of the question, but I'm so artist first oriented. I'm sort of really interested in any if there's an artist I love and they want to do X, that's what I want to do. Pretty much. And so I don't it's rare for me to try to initiate something like, the way the kind like to use Saul Zaentz as an example, who decides like, you know, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or or these kinds of movies where usually based on books, where he like had a vision for the book and then a whole movie got put together around that decision. But I mean, I love big canvas, big epic things, but the truth is I really just love going to the circus. And the movies are like the circus. Like the circus is now going to New Zealand, and now the circus is going to Vancouver, and now the circus is going here. And so there's a big part of me that is, that appeals to me.
I was born in 1963 too, and on the farm, my grandfather and my father, that's what kind of they bonded over, was watching early westerns. My dad's a
Yeah,
huge Audie Murphy fan, but for me, it was Jimmy Stewart. I love
yeah,
Jimmy Stewart. I think if I had him and Paul Newman were the two actors
yeah,
that I grew up just wanting to be like.
yeah,
When I saw Cool Hand Luke, I just thought that was the best film ever, and that was the coolest character I'd ever seen on screen. But
yeah,
what I loved about Jimmy Stewart was his reluctant hero.
yeah,
He got drawn into things because it was the right thing to do in terms of the moral compass that he had. And I believe, and when it comes to Aragorn in the books, I
mm,
think there's a similarity there where he's like, I know that I'm destined to be king. I don't feel like I'm king material. I
right,
still have to prove it to myself before I can prove it to anybody else.
yeah,
And I feel that there's a real commonality in Westerns that there is in Lord of the Rings, where there's a a code of conduct that people live by, where Gandalf pushes people mercilessly sometimes, knowing that without that person being pushed, the whole of Middle Earth is going to suffer. So,
yeah.
there's a real similarity to me in terms of even the way it was shot a lot like a Western, where the landscape is a character in the film.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you see me light up when he mentioned Westerns? That is one of my special interests. I love Westerns.
Oh,
I'm such a
brilliant.
nerd about Westerns that I even developed like a 5-page grading system, and we watch them. And I make him sit there. I said, "Here's your pen and your pen.
Yeah.
You're gonna grade it, and we're gonna give him a star rating."
Yeah.
And I just love it.
I love
I
it.
love that. That's great.
Yeah. Do you have do you like Westerns?
I do like Westerns. I'm not as steeped in them, but I do love them. And I mean, I probably, if I had to guess on a favorite Western, which is not from the sort of the old school, I mean, I remember Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven being like a touchstone, um, just because there was something, that level of of naturalism, there was the way it played with the mythic tropes, but in a very, very grounded, like, and morally complicated way.
Yeah. I mean, he was a bad man.
Yeah.
He made a decision to do a bad thing for money,
Yeah.
and but at the same time there was someone worse, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. I tend to be drawn to movies in terms of my favorite movies, films that feature people on missions that are somewhat compromised in some fashion, but need to be. I mean, my number one film of all time still remains Apocalypse Now, which is essentially the ultimate story of like, you know, I wanted a mission, and for my sins, they gave me one,
Yeah.
and then so like that's those sort of big epic, you know, sweeps, but with complicated things. I mean, even Frodo, we saved the Shire Sam, but not for me.
Yeah.
It's that it's
It's
that
such a
same.
tragedy. He knows that he can't remain, and
Yeah,
it's not the Shire that he left, and he's tortured in a way that other people don't understand because of
yeah,
his carrying the ring for so long.
for sure.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Just a side note. Was Frodo's birthday the same day as Bilbo's birthday? Did I read?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They have a shared birthday.
They do.
Oh,
Yeah.
and yet it's not really about Frodo on that day. It's just this whole party about Bilbo.
Well, it's because it's his 111th. That's the only reason why. It's
Yeah.
whatever, the party of special magnificence, right?
Oh, okay,
And
so it was
and
the age.
yeah, but it's also Bilbo knows what he's doing.
Yes,
He's
good point.
decided that this is his he's out. He's decided that he's going to
Mm,
leave the Shire. He's come to that point in his life where there's nothing that these experiences that he had in The Hobbit have changed him in a way that he gets to a point in the Shire where he's like, this is not for me anymore. I'm going to go on my last little adventure and I'm going to go and
yeah,
see the elves again and do these things. Something in him changes, and that's why he decides to make it his
yeah,
final birthday party.
it's true.
In New Zealand, I know that you've probably seen a lot more of it now that you're living there, but was there a favorite location um, that you still return to in your memory from the shooting days?
Absolutely. And the sad irony is I could have gone to so many more places than I actually went because there was always things that in my mind tethered me to computers and conversations and so on. But I do remember the sort of the Battle of Amon right at the end of Fellowship, which was like on the shore of Lake Wakatipu. I think I'm
Yep.
pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Very
I
good.
remember being there for that, which was very rare for me to be that far away from Wellington. I'm not even sure why I was there, but I was there for some reason. And just how beautiful it was. And then Vigo made me this piece of art. Like this, he took a photo of the place and shellacked it to like this piece of green slate and inscribed it to me and gave it to me, not then, but in a subsequent time, as sort of a keepsake. I'm not sure what inspired it. I was very grateful for it. But yeah, so I remember that place keenly in my mind. There were so many amazing, the scene seat, the lakeside, the battle down the hill, all those things. So I remember that place keenly.
That's funny that you say Vigo gifted you a photo because Jed just gifted Vigo a photo last year when we saw him.
Oh, brilliant.
We
Yeah.
went to see his film Falling
Yes.
up in Sandpoint, Idaho, at the local theater there, and I didn't tell him I was going. We just sat in the front row. Some fans actually saved us a seat in the front row, and
Nice.
he had a Q&A at the end of it, and I just stood up and said, Kia ora koutou, Jude Bradford from Aotearoa, Middle Earth, New Zealand. And he goes, oh shit. And then we had a hongi, because he obviously embraced the whole Māori titanga and, the hongi tradition, and that's how you greet someone. And so we did that, and then we had a little chat afterwards. And there was a photo I took at Lake Tekapo
Okay.
when we're down there on location of these beautiful kind of clouds coming in right there on the shorefront. And because I know he's really into photography.
Yeah.
It's also something during COVID that I got into. I made a calendar for expat New Zealanders living overseas.
That's brilliant.
Sunsets of the Kapiti Coast right there on Miromati South Beach. And so, yeah, this was just something I wanted because that's something that he did. It kind of felt right.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
That way, yeah.
I love that.
What part of Tolkien's world would you live in if it were? Yeah, go ahead.
What part
Ah,
of Tolkien's world would you live in if it was real?
yeah, that one for me, that was an easy one. It would have to be Rivendell, I
Yeah.
think, for just a range of reasons. I mean, the idea of a place of sort of peace, refuge, and shelter, but still surrounded by forces of threat and change. That's my jam right there. Is the idea because you can't really appreciate peace and shelter if you're not conscious of the things that endanger it potentially.
And my father he saw himself as kaitianga, he saw himself as a guardian, and you only use the land in a way that actually gives back to you
Yeah,
because of the community we grew up in, which there was a lot of Maori people living there who were very conscious of going, don't overuse the land, use it in conjunction with nature in the way that it should be, and so
yeah,
that it'll give back to you as a plenty. And yeah, I got to see my country in a way that I'd never seen before. I got to see it from horseback.
yeah,
Horses are slow. You get time to take in all of this incredible natural beauty and just go, oh my goodness, we really do live in paradise.
yeah,
And if you look at Edoras, that set at Edoras, how the Greens people took out every single plant
yeah,
that was endemic to that area and kept it alive, took photos of where they were, and put them back exactly where they were taken from because the Department of Conservation made them.
yeah,
People have to shoot in places that no one in New Zealand has been allowed to shoot before or since.
yeah. No,
Uh,
exactly right. It's
yeah,
true.
yeah, we were lucky. Did you get to go to Edoras? I got
No, I didn't. Again, I surely could have. I kind of have this I certainly had this philosophy on rings that even though I was welcome everywhere, like there was no place that I was discouraged to be. Um, I kind of felt wherever I was going to be, I felt like I had to earn my presence there. No one said this to me. Like it was just my own particular internal thing. So if I was going to be on set or on location, um, then there needed to be a reason. And since I had so many other things that I was supposed to be doing that were my primary functions, um, you know, I felt like if I'm going, in fact, I'm now remembering, I think the only reason I think I was in Queenstown at all. I think Fran and Philip were rewriting the Council of Elrond, I think in the schedule of things or somehow. Um, and I remember because it was so crucial to get that scene shaped so it wouldn't be like a 40-minute chunk of the movie.
yeah.
That I think I'm pretty sure it was Peter, but someone said, well, they're working on it. That's where you should be. So get down here and like, no one said get down here, but come down, like make a contribution.
Yeah.
And I remember I spent most of my time in the South Island in a hotel room with Fran and Philippa. They were doing like all the work. I was mostly just there as a sounding board and to make whatever helpful contributions I could. But I think because I was there in the vicinity, then I was able to go. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you do want to go to, to Mount Sunday and see
Yeah.
that bed, I'd love to take you there.
Yeah, it'd be brilliant. I would love to do that.
Yeah, I got to actually I was one of the few people allowed to sleep in the Golden Hall because we took 8 or 10 horses up there to put in the corral to make it look like there'd been horses
Of
there.
course.
And
Yeah, yeah.
so the horse that I eventually bought, Seb, was up there, and I was up there with Mad Max, the horse that I rode. And so we got to actually sleep in the Golden Hall
Wow.
overnight, which I don't think we were supposed to, but we were just like, well, we're here. It's quite a long way back to our camp. Why don't we just stay the night?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
You have so many stories that even I haven't heard yet. And I wonder if that's the same for you with the people that are close to you. Do you just drop stories on them sometimes and they're like, I didn't know that?
No, what tends to happen is if I meet people, people ask me if I get tired of speaking about it and about Lord of the Rings, which I don't, because I consider it a blessing that I was even a part of it. So I find if people ask me questions, I readily and happily answer. If people want to hear a story that's illustrative of something, that the films or the making of the films is illustrative of something that's meaningful to them, then I'm thrilled and happy to chatter away and tell those stories. But I tend not to initiate doing so. Um, yeah, just I think there's just a reflexive humility that keeps me from doing it because I kind of feel like it's skitey otherwise.
That you don't really rate yourself. You're just a doer rather than a teller. And that aligns with Bilbo, in my opinion. Like in The Hobbit, when the dwarves come and they recruit Bilbo, and he's like, "Well, you might have knocked on the wrong door, but I'm gonna try it," you know? And he just went for it, and he ended up being really capable. And that's what you've showed in your career too, that you've been really capable. So I do see that parallel there.
Well, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I kind of feel like hopefully, if you're lucky, you get put in places of high utility. And the Lord of the Rings for everyone. But in terms of myself personally, yeah, I literally got put in the high utility place I could possibly be because of all the different functions I was doing. So yeah, I was very blessed in that respect.
Which leads me to ask you, is there a person who you work with on these films who, you who wasn't thanked enough but should be?
I know there's someone that I thanked a lot and it still wasn't enough, um, which was Jan Blenken, who of course was
Yeah.
Peter's assistant. Like to say she was Peter's assistant is so grossly under describing her how essential her role was because she was literally the hub of the wheel for everything and by the way, and she was appreciated by everyone, but literally every time you turned around when you appreciated her, and Lord knows Peter and Fran appreciated her immensely, but you couldn't say thank you enough because it was just unbelievable how many roads passed through her by
Yeah.
necessity.
Yeah.
So, and that she never seemed to run out of capacity to contribute to do what needed to be done and talk about humility. I mean, I
Yeah,
may be humble, but compared to her, like I'm a total braggart. So she was just
yeah,
she was literally just the most lovely person. She's not in the film business anymore.
no.
But I remember I think of her often.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Because I hadn't really thought about her for a long time, and you're right. She really was the kind of unsung hero in terms of the go-to person for so much on those films.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Is there someone that you would want to thank while we're on the subject?
Uh, yeah, you, Mark.
Oh,
I,
that's
I
kind. Thank you.
my career started at drama school in Wellington, and you made a promise to um, our entire country.
Right.
And because so many people that I knew in New Zealand had given their time for
Yeah.
free to make these films successful, all of the people who helped us train the horses, all the people who helped costumers, found props for Ra Vincent and all of the team of, Dan Hen, all of those people.
Yeah.
It meant it so much to us as a country to have that premiere for the Return of the King there. I don't think there'll ever be a cultural moment in our country that actually will top it in terms of how the entire nation embraced just what that meant. And that's down to you making a promise to Peter. And I know that he may well have pushed you in that direction. But at the same time, I'm not sure what it cost you personally, but in terms of how it made us feel as a nation, I will always be grateful.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm very grateful for you saying it. And I will say that was one of my better moments. And you're correct. I mean, it was really, I knew, I knew how important it was. I knew how absolutely important it was to Peter for the same reasons, though, not for any personal aggrandizement on his part. Like it was just, he felt like that was what should happen. And we had talked about it, but then of course he did spring that on me in front of the entire country at the Two
Yeah.
Towers premiere, which is hysterical. There's a photograph that Robert Cato, he's Australian, but he was photographing things. There's a photo which Robert sent to me, which is me standing up there, and Peter's got his hand on my shoulder. I'm sure to make sure I don't skitter away off the stage. Because that whole thing when Peter's saying, "Oh, and there's someone else, before we go, and there's someone else we'd love to introduce you to," and I'm listening, but I'm thinking to myself, I wonder who it is, because it's surely not going to be me. That wasn't even a thought. Like,
Yeah,
and then he calls me up and I'm like, oh boy. And so, but yeah, but it was, sometimes you just, when you know what the right thing to do is, the
yeah,
consequences of it. And the truth is, look at how well it turned out for
yeah,
everybody. So,
no, yeah,
it was that, but that comes back to again, putting yourself in a position where you can do the right thing and the consequences or your fear, because sometimes there are no consequences beyond just your fear of what you think they may be. But I do remember after that event, just to be humorous, like I didn't call back to Los Angeles to say what had happened because I figured there was no like camera phones, there was no like video, and I figured I'll just, they probably won't even hear about it. And then the next day I go to the Felix Cafe, which was my go-to place in Wellington, went back when it was open. And they would keep newspapers, like right, like any cafe, out on the tables. And
yeah.
there was a ginormous photo of Peter and I, you know, with a giant headline and like victory in Europe kind of sized font. And I was like, I guess I better call and get
Yeah,
out in front of this.
how did that phone call go?
It actually went vastly better than I thought it would. It was sort of like it was one of those things where it was similar to the casting of Vigo, like when there was that change. Um, Sometimes you just had to call and say, "This is what's happened, and this is what I did," and then often I would be told, "Well, I guess you did." And then I kind of decided that if I didn't get fired, because in my mind, in my imagination, I still thought that was possible, which is you know, um, if I didn't get fired, then basically it must not have been that bad, or they
Yeah,
would fire me. So yeah,
it worked out well. That became a global phenomenon. It was one of the
yeah,
most televised things in film history in terms of that red carpet.
yeah.
I
It
don't
was
know if you remember my son Sadwin. He played Eldarion, Aragorn and
Oh, that's
Arwen's future
right.
son. And we'd gone to the cast and crew screening, but we thought going to the red carpet might be a bit overwhelming with all of those people. So
Mm.
friends of ours said they were taken for the day. But what we didn't know is they took him to the red carpet. And Vigo's in that car driving down and he sees Sedwin and he grabs him and puts him in the car. And I get a call on my Nokia going, your son is in a car with some guy.
Some guy.
And I'm like freaking out. I look on the big screen and there's Sedwin sitting on Vigo's shoulders, riding in the
Mm.
car.
That's lovely.
Yeah,
That's brilliant.
yeah. It was a beautiful moment. It was a that red carpet was like, I don't care if I never go to another red carpet. I had that.
I agree with you.
It was the longest red carpet in history. I think
Yeah.
1.4
Wow.
kilometers or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It was amazing.
100,000 people turned up. And I
Yeah.
just remember Taika Waititi. He was up at the Play Market offices, which are right there and just opposite the Embassy Theatre, actually. And he was
Sure.
just the man going, "Yeah, go, Ted Bradford. It's so great to see you there," and yelling at everybody's names because he and Jermaine Clements had just done a theatre show at Bats Theatre, just so
Ah,
they were sort of in the area. It was when they came up with the idea of doing what we do in the shadows, actually,
got
was
it.
around that time. So, yeah, he was just shouting out to all of his bros from the theatre world just how cool it was seeing us all there on the red carpet. So, yeah,
That's brilliant. Yeah, no, I remember there was a photograph. There were so many wonderful photographs and video of that event. And you really, yeah, the impact of it, it brings it all straight back.
it does.
What We Do in the Shadows, that was the first New Zealand film that I ever saw, and I thought it was hilarious, by the way. And I wanted to ask you about Brain Dead.
Mm.
What's your opinion on Brain Dead?
I love Brain Dead, but you got to remember, I came by my love of the genre quite organically. So I was watching, you know, horror films and science fiction films, fantasy films, and reading, books in that genre. So for me, I thought it was just great. And the job I had, the job I had where I saw Bad Taste for the first time it was my job to license U.S. distribution rights to basically what the company called B movies, but they were basically so they were just genre movies. I didn't consider them B movies, but I knew what they meant by that term, and so they were all like horror movies and science fiction and action, these low budget things. So yeah, so that was the waters. Those were the waters I swam in.
The 10-minute lawnmower scene is banned in Germany. You can own the DVD, but you can't show it publicly with that
Wow,
particular 10 minutes in it. I don't know why.
wow, 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 wow.
Tim Balm and I, who plays the lead, of course, we went to a convention in Germany years ago, and they were going to have a screening, and the authorities said no, you can't show it. So
Hmm.
yeah, I said that to Peter, and he said, "Yeah, it's weird. I don't
That
understand."
is weird. Yeah,
Wonder
because
why.
Yeah.
there's so many. Yeah. Well, there you have it. You never know why.
He's about to release the completely digitized, the same technology they used to do the World War One documentary.
Yeah.
He's taken the old, because it was shot on 16 mil, they've taken the old 16 mil print and they've done their magic with it. And yeah, the last time I saw him, which was I was in New Zealand, and Roy Tolkien and I and Royd's son and nephew all spent a day with Peter, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, we're working on Brandon, and it's nearly finished." So
That'll
looking
be
forward to
brilliant.
seeing that. Yeah,
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that.
yeah. I think there's a whole lot of behind the scenes stuff that Costa Boats and other people shot. So I'm kind of hoping that that'll be included in the DVD because all practical effects, no CGI.
No,
Everything was
brilliant.
done by hand.
I hope that happens.
Me too. Well, do you have anything final you'd like to say to the fans?
And all the many, many opportunities I've had to speak with fans or people who have approached me or kids, because now fans have now these fans now have children, like who are like, who are maybe are watching they get to watch they watch the films on chronological order, right? They watch the Hobbit films first and
Yeah,
then into Lord, and you just realize how enduring and important it is to people. And we got to touch it, to contribute to it in various ways. Um, you can have 100 successful career lifetimes, and never achieve that and still have done well. So this is like almost like touching the face of God. It's like, it's so rare, so rare.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we have a little thing we like to do where we say a little thing from The Hobbit that Thorin says to Bilbo just before he passes.
And then you would say, may the hair on your toes never fall out.
I take
Okay,
a piece of gold, put it into our gold stash. Shall we have a go?
Ready?
let's give it a try.
Okay. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world.
May the hair on your toes never fall out.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. It's been such a privilege to talk to you again.
Yes. I just wanted to thank you personally. This whole idea came from, I just wanted to give the people at home something to relate to. You've done a really good job. And this is my second interview ever. So
Oh,
hopefully it's
wow.
right. And it was a lot of fun talking with you. I just really appreciate it.
Well, it was a pleasure, and I can't you for someone who's only done 2 interviews, you did it beautifully.
Thank you.
Have a great time in Vancouver. My auntie and uncle live there.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, they're both Kiwis. My uncle was the orthopedic surgeon for the Canadian ski team for years and had a practice in Nanaimo and Victoria, and now they've just retired to Vancouver proper. So wave as you go by.
I will do so. And thank you both again. This has been really lovely.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Good day. Peace.
Bye. Bye.
Good
That was
job.
really good. That was really good. That was if it doesn't get any better than that, it doesn't matter, right? That was good.